the technology is that it was developed through the eyes of a businessman, keep it simple, under the KISS method, keep it simple. And if I could apply the law of economics, then in fact I could bring it in by the approach of decentralization, both in mass production as well as installation.
So that not everyone knew what they were making, they were just making a little part of it.
Well, no, that was not the question. For example, if I was to build up a large manufacturing facilities and put in $5 or $15 billion over a 15, 20-year period of time, then the banking institutions, the World Banking System controls me. But there are many people, independent business people that own their own plastic mold injection outfits. They own their own electronic areas. So the question is, as a businessman, why should I try to invest in equipment and hardware and buildings and so forth that's already there? Give the opportunity to those people who have existing business or want to go into independent businesses, okay, and say, hey, here's a product, this is what we want you to make. You go ahead and do it. But you centralize both the production of the devices as well as the decentralized installation, because we're facing a very high critical situation today. As an example, if you look at my logo, it says Job 38 verse 22 and 23. And Job 38 verse 22 and 23. All right, now I started development of the water fuel cell technology back during the time when the Arabs threw the embargo on the United States. And at that time, we were caught by surprise. And as an example, we had only 2.5 days of aviation fuel to fight a war. In all probability, at that time, if Russia would have known it, they probably would have attacked the United States. Our entire sophisticated naval task force sat out in the ocean for several weeks before the first supply ship came alongside. I was affiliated in retail into truck parts, making over $1 million a year profit, actually $20 million throughout the United States. And when our trucks stopped along the side of the roads and goods and services were no longer moving, then I started asking such questions as, hey, how long do we have before the food supply chain in the United States is disrupted? And many businesses like Cardinal Food Industry in Columbus, Ohio said, hey Stan, we have less than 27 days. If you don't get those trucks moving, then the masses of people in Columbus, Ohio will be facing starvation. Because the entire industrial base of the U.S. as well as international is based on the supply and utilization of energy. And it alarmed me that a little country over the Mideast could actually cripple the United States, not only cripple the United States, but actually cripple the war of the entire world based on the supply of energy to maintain those industrial bases. So at that time, I went into my office laboratory and said, God, I love my country. It's the greatest country. If you'll help me put a power supply in the country, I'll do anything that you want me to do. So I have been actually bringing in the technology under the power and authority of the Word of God. And of course, many people ask me why I'm still alive today. Well, I've learned the power of angels. In the Bible, one guardian angel destroyed 185,000 Assyrian troops. And in the Bible, one guardian angel destroyed all the firstborn in Egypt, and I have two of them with me at all times. One happens to be a foot bigger than I am. He's got a chest on like that, and I said, thank you, Lord, I need him. So when I started, my background is quite diversified, from research development, product development, engineering, corporate entrepreneuring, starting a corporation from ground floor right on it, up into multi-international areas. And so I really have found out the Lord had prepared me well over 20 years or more to do what I'm doing today. So back in 1975, as an independent businessman, I was relatively not attached to any major research development facility. So I started to develop the technology in my own laboratories, and as a result, it was pretty hard to extrapolate what I was doing. One of the strategies was, of course, I had filed a series of patents. I did not file a total master patent. You know, there's many loopholes in both in the U.S. patent processing and international areas. As an example, if you would release some of this technology into the public domain, England will statutorily block you from receiving your patents all in Europe.
Yeah, well, that's what we've heard too, is that if you're trying to put any patents in or anything, it's the quickest road to the CIA or whoever is trying to stop this kind of work. So that's why I'm amazed that you've actually...
Well, what happened in the United States was that in the late 70s, Congress had passed the law that the U.S. government must now recognize the inventor, because it's in our Constitution that we have the rights for to invent the technology. So I doubt very seriously if this technology would have been able to be developed in any other country of the world because of the Constitution. And yes, I had fought many, many battles. The Arabs had tried to squelch and suppress the technology, so as the Russians, and even Japanese elements had come into the technology. But the strategy was, as the Lord had shown me through the Holy Spirit, was that as I started developing the technology, I started filing the patents. I filed multiple series of patents. And each patent by themselves, where it was patentable and did solve a given problem in utilizing hydrogen as a fuel source. But they'd only woke up to the second last patent as to really what I had. And at that time, it was too late. Yes, I had fought many battles, and of course I'm writing a book about all of it. And the title of the book is With the Lord There's Purpose, and it will give my testimony of all the battles and so forth we have fought. But when I was pulled into the Pentagon, when the U.S. government recognized what I had, and I was escorted into the Pentagon because wars had been won or lost by the supply of fuel, and of course Patton proved that in World War II. And we, in our national military budget, about 50% of that's for logistic support of energy. Well, also during the Arab embargo, as an example, when we had no diesel fuel to operate our diesel-fired submarines, the Nuclear Task Force had to go on alert 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In a very short period of time, over 60% of our Nuclear Task Force had become inoperable. And as a result of that, the U.S. for the first time had no abilities even for global defense. Shortly now from 1975, during the Arab embargo, we were dependent on about 40% of foreign oil. And this is where the President of the United States said that we must come up with an alternate energy source if we are to survive. We have not reversed our dependency on foreign oil. It's now escalated to well over 60%, where I forced DOE, Department of Energy, to admit to the American people that, in fact, we are still dependent of around 60% on foreign oil. Now, if anything happens or takes place where that oil is stopped to the countries, then the entire economic base of this country or any other world would collapse. I have been preaching, in fact, that the same thing that occurred in the U.S. fields that occurred from 1965 to 75, where our oil pressure started dropping in the oil fields, we went on the dependency of foreign oil. Now, the exact same thing that has occurred in the United States is also has been occurring in the Arab fields. You just can't keep pulling the oil out of the ground and expect that it's going to be there forever. And I have 5 governmental agencies, U.S. governmental agencies, that's verified now that, in fact, that their oil fields are starting to depressurize. But they are depressurizing 3 times faster than it occurred in the United States. So the experts know that the fact that we have less than 15 years of supply of oil coming out of the Mideast. Now, after 15 years, if there's not a new and an alternate energy source that comes into the world economy, then the entire world economy will be destroyed very quickly.
And are you saying the governments are admitting this and saying go ahead?
Yes. In other words, the issuance of our patents was on the premise that we would bring the technology out and get it into the marketplace. Another situation has come up, of course. I have been trying to develop the technology to possibly head off the Mideast crisis. What they really don't understand, what they're not really realizing at the present time in the Mideast, if Saddam decides to use CBR weaponry, that's chemical, biological, radiation weaponry, from what I understand, that Germany had sold them the germ warfare. If he uses this type of weapon in the Mideast, then it's possible that the germ warfare that they have is that the contamination, the germs can breed on the bacteria in the air or bacteria in water or even in bacteria of oil. It takes a very small amount of deposit of the germ warfare in order to allow it to expand and grow. So if he uses this in the Mideast at this critical time, then what's going to happen is that it's possible that all the oil reserves in the Mideast will become contaminated. If that's the case, then every country of the world or respective country of the world will have to stop shipment of oil to their countries to prevent the contamination to occur within their own country and possibly affect the lives of the people within each country. So you're looking at that it's possible that within a short period of time, the entire flow of oil coming out of the Mideast will totally be stopped, and that will shut down the entire industrial base in the entire world.
Are you saying like you know the Rockefellers and whatever have so far, like we were saying before, come in and said stop the development of this technology? Are you saying that they won't do that anymore?
No. There are several major swings that has now started to alert the public that we must do something. One is truth is a very powerful thing. Now they're recognizing, in fact, that the oil reserves are not there for the world, and that they are depleting very, very quickly, and that we must somehow swing to an alternate energy source to allow the economic base to survive. Secondly, we're realizing that we cannot keep continually polluting the air. We can't keep putting hydrocarbons in the air. We can't keep extracting oxygen out of the air. We must be able to reverse the greenhouse effect. And if we do not do this, then it's very reasonable to say that within a short period of time we'll start to suffocate. In the period of time since the introduction of the automobile, as an example, the content in the air, I believe, was around 38% or 28%. And that has from that point on until now, it has dropped as much as 7%. Now, right now, there's 5.2 billion people on the face of this earth, and within a mere 15-year period of time, it'll double to 9 billion. We already know by satellite that the rainforests are dying, that over 50% are dying, that's irreversible, they are dead. That's supplied about 80% of the oxygen in our air. So we can't, yes.
I think he also asked about Rockefeller. They had tried every way to stop him too. Yeah. He
Yes.
asked about Rockefeller.
Yes, in my, it became very evident that this type of technology cannot be developed through the federal governments nor the multi-international corporations because of their control mechanism. It had to be developed by an individual working out of his garage without that type of control mechanism. So it was a way that when I started, the Lord had started to have me develop the technology and develop in such a way that I was able to get all the patents issued both nationally and not only win it for the United States, but also win it for the world. Because once they realized what I had, and as I said, they had pulled me into the Pentagon, there was two major reasons that I had used to get us off of national security and allow it to come in. Number one, if you don't have an economy, you will not have a government, and if you don't have a government, you're not going to have a military. It's just as imperative that this technology get into the marketplace as well as these other areas. Second one is, what happens, gentlemen, if a foreign power can come in your land and use your own existing laws to block this type of technology from coming in? That's when President Reagan took the executive action to assure and guarantee the issuance and the processing of these patents. So it's a struggle. We're all in the same boat, so to speak, and therefore we have to be able to solve the problem. We know that the federal government and the multi-internationals cannot control it. If I had signed this technology over to General Electric or Westinghouse or any other multi-international corporation, they would be taken over within a period of 24 hours. If you have enough money, you can take over anything you so desire. Now, 60%, we're paying out well over $200 billion to the Arabs for that petrol fuel. They spent $200 billion from trying to keep this thing off the marketplace. That's why communication is one of the most greatest things that we have today. That's why I'm here in communicating as to what we're doing.
I heard that the stealth bomber was maybe flies using the same sort of technology.
Yes, and also we've developed a hydrogen-powered aircraft that was originally to go Mach 25 in outer space, and with this technology to take it right on up to 150 Mach. The United States is not sitting on this technology, but with no stretch of the imagination. Right now, as we are down to a day and a quarter of aviation fuel to fight a war. And once we bridge and reduce the fuel supplies, go down to a day, then the Joint Chiefs of Staff will have to make the decision, no more global defense. And as we all know, that when countries go from a dictatorship to free democracy, the war brokers are in there, and the pendulum can swing into civil war or disrupt it into tremendous war. And of course, they make their monies by war. That's what they do. They promote wars. And the war brokers started World War I, they'd start World War II, and they'd start World War III. In the name of making money, whether we live or survive, they'd be happy making the money. So the situation is very real now. It's primarily over the Mideast that could topple and cripple the entire industrial base of the entire world. So this was the basis of reasons for developing the water fuel cell technology. And as I had developed it, there were several major design criteria that I had to comply with. The first one was that I had to build the system in a garage. And the reason for that is because if I could build it in a garage, I would bypass exotic manufacturing technology that can toy it. For example, if a guy had developed a chemical that can make the solar cell more efficient, but if Exxon controlled the vapor, which is in turn controlled by the Arabs, it can't get out in the marketplace. So the technology had to be built by the KISS method. Keep it simple, stupid. Don't make it complicated. And secondly, it had to be built out of very readily available materials, because we don't have time to develop exotic materials or like used platinums and so forth that we have not access under, like Russia controls the bulk of platinum in the world. Another criteria was that it had to be built through the laws of economics, that the guy who comes up with the simple way is going to win out. Now there's a lot of Cadillac ideas that come into existence, but because it violates the law of economics, it never gets out to the marketplace. So we had to develop through the eyes of a businessman that the guy who comes up with the cheapest way is going to win out. Now my files back home in my laboratory, I have the most compilated study on hydrogen that's ever come out of the scientific world through NASA. As you probably know, the Columbia spaceship program is propelled by liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. And in that report, it clearly stipulated that hydrogen was the most ideal fuel of the future that could be utilized anywhere in the world. But they had not the answer in the following areas. Number one, to produce the hydrogen gas economically. Second area was to be able to control the hydrogen on demand. Third area was to be able to adjust the burn rate of the hydrogen gas to co-equal the fossil fuels. And I added a fourth one, the ability to transport it without spark ignition. And I hold all the patent rights both nationally and internationally on this technology. Now since the technology was built under the power authority word of God in a garage, it now gave me the abilities to be able to release it under the law of economics. So when as a product development engineer, whenever anyone would show me a new idea, a new concept, a new way of doing something, if it did not comply with the law of economics, you gentlemen would not hurt my feelings. You can get out and walk out of the meeting anytime you want. I would do the same thing. If the technology was complying to the law of economics, and then when you look at this tech base, if you answer the question that yes it does, then you'd have to agree that we have a new alternate energy source that we can move into the economies of the world and do it very, very, very quickly. So we started to proceed on developing, and as the Lord had shown me the knowledge pertaining to water. Right now we're facing a tremendous problem beyond the Mideast situation. I was in Washington, D.C. in 1965 when the government called the scientists together to come up with a fail-safe nuclear power system. In 3 days and listening to their testimony, I got up in the meeting, and this is before I had come to the Lord, and said, gentlemen, everything you said is a bunch of BS. There is no substance on the face of this earth that you subjected to the hostile environment of nuclear radiation, you're going to have the hourglass effect. And then, of course, 3 Mile Island proved that prophecy out many years later. And, of course, Chernobyl, we all know about Chernobyl. Now, they talk about the radiation going up in the atmosphere, but they don't talk about the meltdown going down into the water table. And the water table now is dumping the contaminated or radioactive water into the Mediterranean, which is now, in a very short period of year, the Mediterranean will increase in radiation, will spill over into the Mediterranean. So all those millions of people in Europe now that will use the water to wash their clothes or to drink or to process that water will probably die of cancer due to the high exposure to radiation. So now, during, for an example, England almost had a near nuclear accident. Some brilliant engineer decided the way to reconstitute the carbon rods, send a bunch of amps into the carbon rods, and all it does is create a hot spot and splits the rod, which in turn you now have no control. Helsinki just shut down another nuclear power plant with problems with the circulation on their stainless steel piping. So we're really facing a very critical situation all the way around. Now, in getting in this type of technology or an equivalent technology is going to take the masses or the people to come together in one accord. It's no longer going to say, well, I'm going to leave it up to someone else to do it. If we don't do it, it's not going to get in. So in starting developing the technology, the first area was to address how to release the hydrogen from natural water and do it economically and satisfy the first major requirement of NASA. And of course, what the first thing we did in the scientific area is that you always got to learn to ask the right question. Now, in the prior art, example, when we demonstrated this technology under 101, U.S.C. Section 101, the U.S. Patent Office says that whenever you present something, you must show unoperability, otherwise you do not get the issuance of the patents. When we had showed them the technology pertaining to water, the first thing that when they recognized this, is why has no one else thought about this technology before? Well, there were several reasons. I gave them number one. If you had looked at the scripture, Job 38, verse 22 and 23, the Lord said that the knowledge would come at a time of great trouble. And if this is not a time of great trouble, I don't know what is. The second one is that the reason why Faraday did not discover the electrical polarization process is because he needed several modern day inventions and he needed some prior knowledge. One of the things he needed was stainless steel, the invention of stainless steel 304 material, which is chemically inert to the process. If you expose it to hydrogen and oxygen gases in a water bath exposed to voltage, it does not have a chemical interaction.
That's why you said platinum before, because platinum's inert to the same process.
Well, platinum is extremely ultra expensive,
Yeah.
and it will break down under the conditions of exposing to hydrogen and oxygen, some of it. Okay, so stainless steel became a very economical material to use. Matter of fact, on our actual lab certification testing, the longevity of the stainless steel material is 0.0001 per year. So the fuel cell is just as good as the time you fired up to 20 years, going up to 10,000 years. And if any of you guys live over 10,000 years, you come back and tell me, I want to tell you, learn your secret. So the stainless steel material gave us the abilities that we now have a component we do not need to replace. We set up a non-chemical environment in order to release the hydrogen from the water. Okay, so we now have, we don't have to replace the parts. If you ever look at the prior arts and electrolysis processes, you will see that their electrodes are tremendous mass and size. If a brilliant engineer could get a car to run down the road on electrolysis, he may get it to last for maybe a minute to 5 minutes or so, but all of that mass size of electrodes will decompose. So inherently, the electrolysis process did not comply to the law of economics because it was a self-destructive unit and we had to add chemicals to it. Now, if you had an electrolysis process and had to add chemicals to it, and let's say you did get a car to run down the road, then you would have to spend billions of dollars to try to come up with chemical refinery plants to be able to try to even support this gas supply levels in the United States. And that would cost billions of dollars over a 20 to 30 to 40 year period of time, and EPA would not allow you to dump the chemicals onto the ground. So electrolysis process does not comply to the law of economics and does not be able to solve the problem. It's a self-destructive unit. So we had to come up with a non-chemical device, come up with a way that we could release the hydrogen from water, and if we can do this, water has a phenomenal amount of energy source in the form of hydrogen, and if you burn it, its energy release is 2.5 times more powerful than that of gasoline. So the first answer we needed to find was how do we economically split the water molecule? Now the key was how do we switch off the covalent bonding of the water molecule, and so we'd address what takes place. Well, when the two hydrogen atoms...
Stan, could I interject 1 sec?
Yes.
Could you sometimes, when using a technical term, just describe it more fundamentally for those who haven't got the technical basis, like covalent bonds?
Yeah, well, yeah, I'll get to that. First was to address how do we switch off the covalent bonding of the water molecule and do it economically. And when you consider the formation of the water molecule, then when the two hydrogen atoms link to the oxygen atom to form the water molecule, under the law of physics something's got to happen, right? Now what actually happens is that this outer orbit of the oxygen atom normally has only 6 electrons in it. But this particular orbit will allow us up to 8 electrons to be occupied at one particular time. And as a result of this, this now allows the two hydrogen atoms to link up with the oxygen atom to form the water molecule to go into stable state. Now, on the law of physics, that for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction, something's got to happen. Now, what actually happens is that when the two hydrogen atoms link up to the oxygen atom, and the oxygen atom accepts the hydrogen electron to set up the covalent bonding, then something's got to happen. And what happens is that under normal state, there's 8 electrons in the oxygen atom, and then there's 8 protons. But when the oxygen atom accepts the 2 hydrogen electrons, then there's an imbalance that occurs. And what now takes place is we have now 10 electrons, but we still have only 8 protons. And as a result of this, the oxygen atom takes on a negative electrical charge. Now, since the hydrogen atom is now sharing its electron to set up the covalent bonding, then the positive charge proton swings the hydrogen atom to the positive charge. Therefore, the atoms of the water molecule takes on electrical charge. Now, that was the second major thing that Faraday would have to know, is in fact that the bonding, the 2 unlike atoms of the water molecule is actually being held together by an electrical attraction force. And that electrical attraction force is equivalent to the two shared electrons.
So in other words, once it's all combined together, the total charge is 0.
Right. That the water molecule is stabilized to net electrical charge 0, but its atoms are opposite electrically charged. Now, another way to verify this, you can send a microwave. The question is, what happens when you send a microwave energy through water, and why does it heat up the water and cause the water molecules to agitate? Well, what happens is the microwave is swinging the atoms of the water molecules because they have a electrical charge applied to them, and that's why microwave energy will heat up the water and superheat it very, very quickly. All right, so the key is now that what's holding these atoms together is this electrical bonding force Q and Q prime. And it is only equivalent to the two shared electrons, because on the law of physics says for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. So we know now that it was very obvious then to say, hey, if that's the case, and these atoms do not take on an electrical attraction, then in fact it was obvious that if I've exposed the water molecule to a external high voltage field, then we could pull apart the water molecule and do it economically. And the question is, does these unlike atoms take on an electrical attraction field? And they do not. And the reason why they do not do this is because the oxygen atom, those electrons are paired together and swing in opposite direction as they pair together. They cancel out their electromagnetic field, and as a result, there is no electrical attraction force between the two unlike atoms. So all we now have to do is to overcome the electrical attraction force of these two atoms based on Faraday's, based on Coulomb's and Newton's second law of electrical force with an electronic circuit. So what we had done now is set up and put an electric voltage field here, and electric voltage field here. We do it this way. So now we set up an electrical field and expose the water molecule to a high electric voltage field and restrict the amps. Then, if this now is set up as a B plus voltage zone and this sets up as a B minus voltage zone, then under the law of opposite charges will do what? Like charges will repel, and unlike will attract. So therefore, if I put a B plus voltage field here, would not now the negative charge oxygen atom be attracted to that voltage field? Now, likewise, at the same time, would not, if I put a B minus voltage field here, would not the positive charge hydrogen and oxygen now be attracted to the negative voltage field? And as a result, now we're using voltage as a potential energy source and pulling apart. The water molecule starts to elongate. As you start to elongate the water molecule, you're now changing the time share rate of the electron, and as a result of that, you pull apart the water molecule. Now there's another phenomena that is happening also, is that in the characteristic of water, it is a dielectric liquid. Okay? Now in the electrolysis process, it was required that the two best patents ever issued in the electrolysis process was Ian North and Horvath's patents, which clearly stipulated that in an electrolysis process, that if you put it into an electrolysis cell, that first of all you had to use distilled water, which is a dielectric liquid. And because of that, you had to add the chemicals to it. And so with their systems approach, they had to put in 80% was distilled water, which has cost just as much money to process natural water into distilled water than it does to run your car down the road. And then you'd have to put in between 20% per volume of chemical additives like sodium hydroxide or potassium hydroxide in order to get hydrogen gas production. And because the electropolarization process of using voltage now to separate the water molecule, we now can use ordinary natural water and have it non-processed. But there's another feature to it, is that natural water is a dielectric liquid. And when you expose the water molecules to the high voltage zone, then what happens is that because of the dielectric properties of water, then the dielectric properties of water will now become electrically intensified. And so as it takes on an electrical charge, then the hydrogen charges will increase in their positive charge areas, and also the oxygen atom increases in its negative electrical charge. And so what happens now, that since you are increasing these electrically charges being exposed to the applied voltage field, then the covalent electron switches off in the following way, that as this increases positive electrical charge, would not this negative charge covalent electron be attracted back towards the hydrogen atom? And since the negative charge oxygen atom is increasing in its negative electrically charged, would you not now have a repelling force being applied to the covalent bonding? And so as a result, when you tune in now on voltage, now you have the ability to automatically switch off the covalent bonding of the water molecule. Now that now became a physical force in separating the water molecule, and voltage now becomes potential energy. Now in the field of physics, we know that voltage does in fact perform work. We've known this for quite some time. But heretofore, never anyone ever dreamed of using potential energy in the form of voltage to perform work in order to pull apart the water molecule. And Faraday would also have had to have the knowledge that in fact he had to have an electronic circuit, which we call the voltage intensifier circuit, that gave us the ability to switch off the amp flow and allow the voltage to take over in a dead short condition. Now in all probability, if he'd had this knowledge, then we'd have been on hydrogen many years ago. Now the point out about potential energy on voltage, to give you an example of this, is if you go home and you turn on your TV set or your computer monitor, you're adjusting the B+ voltage potential behind the screen, and as a result you're now accelerating the negative charge electrons coming off the gun, and that increased velocity of the negative charge electrons striking the fluorescent material now produces a greater light intensity. We know also, like in a cyclotron, that if you use opposite electrical fields, you now can accelerate particles in a 2 or 3 mile area tunnel, and as a result of this you can accelerate these particles close to the speed of light, and those particles hit a photographic plate, and that's how physicists study matter. So we knew in fact that voltage does in fact perform work, but heretofore no one ever dreamed of applying it to switch off the covalent bonding of the water molecule and do it in this way and do it economically.
It was always thought in the past that current did the work.
Right, always current, and they would always, because now Faraday, he needed modern day electronic circuit designs capable of restricting amps and allow voltage to go over. He worked with a very crude battery, and he worked with just an electrical wires going into the beaker with chemicals. So he created a dead short condition, and when you create the dead short condition, you cannot bring voltage up. Voltage remains low, and amps take over and does the work. All right, so this is why Faraday did not discover the electric polarization process. Now, in order to come up with the economic way of doing this, then the Lord had me to develop what was called the VIC, or the voltage. It's called the voltage intensifier circuit. Which gave us abilities now to restrict the amps and allow voltage to take over. Now, as you know, or who's electronic people in here? Praise the Lord. Okay, whenever electronic people can understand this far easier than a physicist. A physicist deals with strictly the nucleus of the atom, and electronics deals with the movement and deflection of electrons, and that's exactly what we're talking about, moving and deflecting the electron. And in the electronic circuit, it's clearly proven by Coulomb's and Newton's second law, you can use electrical force to move electrically charged particles in an electronic circuit. Is that not the basic basis of electronics?
Yes.
Okay, so we're not defining the laws of physics in order to accomplish the task. Now, whenever you put a dielectric liquid between two electrical conductive plates, what do you got? You got a capacitor, right? So we know that when you take a coil and hook it in series to a capacitor, you now develop what's called a resonant charging choke. So now I've set up two charging chokes on the opposite side of the capacitor. And I'm now allowing the water and the properties of water now to become the property or the component part of the electronic circuit. So we now know that on a resonant charging choke, that when I put in a switching diode in here, then as I would pulse the circuit, then these coils would become energized, and they would create an electromagnetic field which acts as an electronic choke, right? The electrons coming off of here has an electromagnetic field, and as a result, when these coils develop their magnetic field, it now chokes off and prevents electron flow from occurring. So since the diode now is acting as a switching diode, once you terminate the pulse, it opens up the pulsing circuit and now allows these magnetic fields to collapse. And when they collapse, now we're producing a unipolar voltage field across the capacitor, but then in the process we are restricting amps. Now note, we are using the electromagnetic field to restrict the amps, not a resistive element. If you have a resistive element, you're consuming power.
I know one thing that was noticed in your circuit diagram is that you were using a resistive choke.
Or is that a mistake?
Or is that in your actual...
No, in filing the patents, I filed them in several ways. They said, well, I use it this way. You have a hard time getting around me, because not only have I filed the patents on the particular technology, but I filed patents in all of its related area to give me a technological buffer zone to be able to ensure that I can bring the technology in.
So in other words, that resistive choke that you've got in your...
It's not necessary.
It's not necessary? It says, where the hell is it? Here, you say here, resonant charging circuit, resistive coil wire R2.
Yes, you can put a resistive wire with the coil. So some intelligent guy is going to say, well, I got a copper coil, and one says, well, I'm going to use a resistive wire. Well, sorry folks, I got it both ways.
Oh,
Okay.
I see what you're saying. Just to get around the patent. It's just people might use that to get around the patent.
Yeah, I mean, a guy invents something, they say, well, all I'll do is I'll change something on the patent and try to get around it. Okay. Well, this was developed under the KISS method. Keep it simple, stupid. So the simpler it is, the harder it is to get around a patent. And of course, when this knowledge was coming forth, it was fantastic for us, because I knew that if we kept it simple like this, well, then it would be very, very hard to go. And if you look at all of our patents, you apply a voltage across that water molecule, you violated my patent rights. Okay, now what we're doing is that this circuit is not only now restricting the amps, but we're now pulsing and adjusting this pulse frequency to tap into the resonance properties of water by the dielectric value of water. And as a result, that when you tune into this, then what happens, amp draw drops down to the lowest value, and voltage now takes off towards infinity if the electronic components will allow it to occur.
What sort of frequency are we talking about?
Well, we have various frequencies when you can adjust to hit resonance. The key was to go for natural water, non-processed water. And so it was very obvious that we've developed the electronic circuitry to interface with this, that we now electronically zero in to the resonant frequency of any form of natural water, because it would change based on the contaminants within the water.
You just let it peak itself.
Right. It automatically scans it right in, locks right in the resonance, and holds it there.
You can't
order of
change much.
frequency?
Pardon?
What order of frequency are we talking about? A few hertz or...
No, we go from 0 up to 10 kilohertz. Even with this type of circuit you see here, if I hit this at 10 kilohertz, would this not increase it to 20 kilohertz? So not only is this as a pulsing circuit to restrict amp flow, it's also is a frequency multiplier. And guess what else? If I was going to increase more hydrogen gas yield, what would I do?
Increase the voltage.
Huh?
Increase the voltage in it.
Yes, now how would I do that? Would I need to change the pulsing circuit here?
Oh, just change the amplitude of it.
All I have to do here is just increase the number of turns of this coil, would I not?
But if you want to do it electronically so that you can control it, you could do it just by having a circuit controlling input voltage. And that
Oh
can
yes,
control
in the
gas
car,
out.
in the
Yes.
car, for an example, we're varying it like from 0 to 12 volts,
That's right, yeah, with an
But-
accelerator.
But these can be varied from 0 to 2,000 volts, 2 kilovolts, right, or higher. But what I'm pointing out is the electronic circuitry can remain the same. If I want to increase the electrical power still further, the inductance capacitance of this resonant charging choke simply just needs to be increased.
So would you step in some more inductance, or would you just design a bigger one if you wanted to?
Yeah, I just simply design a bigger one and wrap more coils to it. So instead of hitting it at 2K, I'm hitting it at 5K, or hitting it
How many
at
millihenries
90,000
are the
volts.
chokes?
Huh?
How many millihenries are the chokes, approximately?
Well, I mean, you can come, it depends. Again, it depends. It depends on what you're trying to accomplish. You're going to have to adjust the power input of the circuit, and the only problem with to adjust the circuit to get your proper voltage. So you're going to consume electrical power in the circuit. But the point being is, under the power equation, whenever you restrict the amps, the only thing you got left over is voltage, right? Which is potential energy, so you're not consuming it. So I'm going to consume a little bit of energy, 2 amps, or 3 amps, or 5 amps, big deal. Because when you release the energy from the water in the form of the hydrogen gas, its energy yield is 2.5 times that of gasoline. Now note the rule of thumb, it's not 2.5 times that of fingernail polish. It's not 2.5 times that of butter. It's actually 2.5 times that of gasoline. Okay, now, okay. All right, so now the VIC unit was experiment in developing to restrict the amp flow and allow voltage to take over to release the hydrogen and oxygen gas from water.
What sort of frequency is this that you really operate in, and when you're using, say, just an ordinary tap water or something? What sort of frequency does it normally work?
Well, it'll vary from 0 up to 10 kilohertz is what we've been working in the range. If you go up into the megahertz range, then you're getting a more exotic type of electronic components, which is not necessary. You can peak it a little bit further, but it isn't going to do any good. The action is really hitting it with the voltage when you're tuning into the resonance. And when you hit in the resonance under this condition, then the water molecule just falls apart. Okay, so
That's what I'm asking. What is the resonance frequency of water?
Yeah, and based on different, natural like well water, rainwater, city water, ocean water, okay, they have different contaminants, anywhere from 2 parts per million to 20 parts per million, up to 40 parts per million, okay? So resonance can occur anywhere in our area. And the other factor that affects resonance is the rate by which the gases is going through the resonant cavity. And so that can change. So you can hit resonance at a low voltage level, and as you're raising the voltage level, let's say from 100 volts to 2,000 volts, it's possible that the flow rate of water will start changing resonance. So we've developed the electronic circuits to zero in on that. So it's a very broad range. The beautiful thing I like about it is it's in the audio range, so it's just like using audio transformers. You can accomplish the task. Now, if you want to go up and zero it up or fine for a particular application, that's fine. But the key was to keep using natural water. If I use natural water or rainwater, is it costing me anything? So the 3 components I'm using in the operation of the fuel cell is stainless steel 304 material, which you don't need to replace. So am I complying with all law of economics? Second one is I'm using natural water. Does it cost me anything for natural water? We had a lot of rain around here the other day, didn't we?
How would that apply on seawater stands?
Same thing. Because you're restricting the amps and allow voltage to take over, the chemical reaction is held at a very minimum. So when you release it, then any contaminants in the water, it remains in the water. Now that's the adverse effect of the fuel cell, is that you've got to get rid of the contaminants. Well, one of the things is that you can operate the fuel cell to meet your energy needs, shut it down, hook a little computer to it, dump out the contaminated water, rinse it out like a dishwater, go ahead and fill it up with water again, re-energize it up to around 4 to 6 ounces of back pressure and continue on operation. But in the cycling, if you notice in my drawings, when you burn hydrogen and oxygen, what's the byproduct? Water, right? Well, instead of letting the water go back up in the atmosphere,
It's pure. It's absolutely pure. You can
Right.
use it for drinking or whatever you want.
right? So can I not recapture the gases coming off and cool it down, and as a result feed it back into the fuel cell and recycle it again? So when I do that, then